Welcome to the Wise Owl Knits podcast. I'm your host, Cheryl Beckrich, and I want to thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to talk about the iconic Elizabeth Zimmermann pattern, the baby surprise jacket. So stay tuned. I'm wearing my Solomon poncho. This is a pattern that came out a couple of years ago. It's a big cable-y commitment, but well worth it. So check that pattern out if you're interested in a cozy, warm poncho to work on this winter and to keep you warm after that. Let's move on to shop news. You can see I changed. I took my Solomon poncho off and now I am wearing my Libby shawl, and the pattern has been released. I had it on a pre-sale last week. This week it's on the introductory sale, so it is 15% off now, and you can use the code 65shawl to get 15% off of the Libby shawl. And that's just good for this week, so hop on over to the shop and pick that up. I will be having some kind of Thanksgiving week sale, so I will let you know all the particulars on that next week. But it will be happening, so make sure you watch to get any of the pertinent codes for the Thanksgiving week sale. Now we'll move on to what I'm working on. I have got a couple of, we're really just one thing off the needles but not quite finished, and another that I've got cast on and got just one repeat done. So I'm going to show you that first. This is a baby blanket that I'm working for the new grandbaby in my life. So this is a cable pattern that came out of Nora Gahn's cable book, and it's totally reversible. It doesn't look the same on both sides, but there isn't really a wrong side. I mean, this is considered the back, but it looks nice on that side, and it also looks nice on this side. I'm using Barocco Comfort for this, and the color name is Buttercup, which beautiful, soft, buttery yellow. So this is a worsted weight yarn, and it is 50% superfine nylon and 50% superfine acrylic. So very, very soft, and also washable, which is really important for new parents. I don't want to saddle anybody with something that's hard to take care of and that they have to not use because they're afraid of it getting dirty and having to hand wash it. So this is going to be one that they can throw in the washer and the dryer and hopefully use it. Got another project that I'm going to talk about later in the episode because it's part of my section on the baby surprise jacket. The next thing that I've started, and it isn't cast on yet, but I consider it started because I've been working on the pattern and the charts, and it actually uses the same cable pattern as the baby blanket. So this is going to be a cabled vest, a little bit oversized and loose, but very classic in design, where it'll have the main cable in the center front and center back, and then it'll be flanked by another cable. So I've got that charted, just do not have it on the needles yet, but I know what yarn I'm using. I'm using Cascade 220 Sport, and I'm sure this just has a color number. Color 8010. Don't you love 8010? So it's just a nice creamy off-white color that I think will look very, very nice in this vest. It'll have a crew neck and a folded hem and some ribbing at the bottom hem and around the shoulders. Since it's a vest, I don't think it'll take me too long to get it done. And like I said, I've got a lot of the pattern writing done already. So hopefully that one will be out quickly, and hopefully I can show you some progress on it next week. I also wanted to talk about the Cowboy Knit Along today. I should have mentioned this in last week's episode, but I completely forgot. So the winners of the Cowboy Knit Along are Cheryl B. and Joe Bob, and I'm going to put their pictures up. First, here's Cheryl's, and this one is Joe's. And both of them won 2 patterns from my shop. So those are already sent out to them, but I want to thank everybody for participating in the knit along, and I just appreciate you guys knitting my patterns. Hey, if you don't mind, it would really help me out if you could click that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave me a comment, and if you want to be notified of upcoming videos, then click the bell so you can get notifications. On to the big mystery of what I'm making for the baby. The first thing I thought of when I found out my son and his wife were expecting was, of course, I need to do some baby knitting, but I thought of the iconic Elizabeth Zimmermann pattern, the baby surprise jacket, and I've always wanted to knit it, but I never have, and so I thought I'd give it a try. I had some more of this Barocco Comfort in a blue color, and they're not going to find out what they're having ahead of time, so I wasn't going to knit something in blue or pink, but I had this yarn and I knew I had about enough of it to make it, and I didn't know how it worked. I wanted to, I guess, try it out first, and it's, you know, it's not a big item because it's just for a baby. So I cast on and I got the baby surprise jacket book and read through it, and the very beginning of it, there is a passage by Elizabeth Zimmermann and it starts off, just read your knitting, just read your knitting, just read your knitting. And she said that 4 or 5 times in a row, at least 3 times in a row. And as I'm following the step-by-step instructions on this pattern that didn't always make a lot of sense to me, I'm like, you know, I've been knitting for a long time, and I don't know if I'm reading this correctly or not. I don't know where I'm at. Am I at the top? Am I at the bottom? Did I start on a sleeve and move over to the other sleeve? I had no idea. And even when I bound off at the end, I had no idea. So I'm going to show you what you get when you're done knitting and how it ends up becoming a sweater. Okay, here is the baby surprise jacket. Once we're done knitting, it's a big blob of fabric. It is not something that will lay flat. There's increases and decreases that just make this a funny looking shape. Now, I know I have my stitch markers on the right side, and when I fold it up, I want those to be on the right side, so I'm showing you the wrong side now. There are 2 segments in this that have buttonholes, so right along here, and both sides of the jacket have buttonholes so that it can be used for either sex, so you'll just end up sewing the buttons on over where the buttonholes are on one side or the other, depending if it's a boy or a girl. So we've got this piece of fabric, and we've got these edges that we know have buttonholes. So my first clue is to put both of those towards the center. And then up here at the top, there are 2 places where I bound off 5 stitches. And apparently that is for the front of the neck. And then these are the sleeves, so we're going to sew up both of these. Now, as I was knitting, you were supposed to slip the first stitch on each row, and I did not always do that, and I was hoping that it wasn't going to matter later on. See right there, I've got a bump rather than a pretty slipped stitch. Well, those will be hidden by the sewing up. See here, I did it like 3 times in a row. I forgot to do it. So that goes there. And we've got a jacket out of this worsted weight, probably the size of a 2-year-old, maybe I think more than a 1-year-old, but depending on the size of the baby, they all come in different sizes. So I will sew that up and put the buttons on the correct side once I know if the baby is a boy or a girl. That is how you fold up the baby surprise jacket. But I will tell you, while I was knitting it, I didn't know if I was at the top or the bottom or where I was at. So it truly was a surprise. It's kind of like knitting your first heel on a sock. You just have to follow the directions and pray that it works out. And in this case, it did. The baby surprise jacket truly is a surprise. While you're knitting it, you can't tell what it's going to be, or at least I couldn't. I had to follow the instructions and trust that it was going to be okay. And that is a little bit counter to Elizabeth Zimmermann's way of teaching knitters to be able to look at what you're doing and read your knitting and go one direction or another based on what you see. That as you get more and more experienced, you'll be able to see what you're doing, and you don't need to follow a pattern. You can make your own patterns. You can have a basic sweater design that you've knit with her percentage system that is a plain sweater, and then you can knit it again and add color work to it. She very much was, you are the boss of your own knitting. You can do what you want. If you want to add a design feature, that's up to you, and nothing is right or wrong. And if something is so wrong that the garment won't work, well, then at least you've learned something from it. So I will be knitting the baby surprise jacket again. I'm going to do it in a mixture of yellow and green. I've got some sock yarn, and I think I'm going to hold it double with just a plain white sock yarn, and we'll see how that works. The way the pattern is written, there is one set of instructions with a number, and if you want to change the sizes, then you use a different size yarn. So I think it was originally done in a sport weight yarn for a 0 to 6 month old. So that's what I'm going to do. Holding two fingerings together is going to be more like a DK. I think that's the normal formula for that. So maybe I'll knit it in fingering, and maybe that'll be too small. So we'll see how it turns out. If it's a little too big, then, that's okay. The baby can just wear it when it's a little bit older. I will delve a lot more into Elizabeth Zimmermann later. A really, really interesting lady. She was born in England in 1910. I think she lived until 1989, but was a knitter all her life, and she went back and forth between English style and continental. I think she had a nanny that knit continental, but her mother and grandmother didn't want her to knit that way because that was the German way. She ended up, I think, coming back to continental, but she was very much of the opinion that each knitter should do what works for them. There's not a right way or a wrong way to do it, and you are the boss of your knitting. I must have gotten that from her subconsciously because I've said that many times. So she's a really, really interesting lady. Had a show on PBS for a few years that was about just about knitting and how you should rely on your own instincts and intuition to make things. You don't necessarily need a pattern. You can figure it out yourself. She came up with a percentage system that if you figure out how big a round you want your sweater, she liked to knit in the round too. She loved circular needles, didn't really love purling. But if you can figure out the bust circumference, so say you want your sweater to be 34 inches round and you know what gauge that you want, you multiply the stitches per inch by the measurement and you get your key number, and everything else is a percentage off of that key number. So we'll go over that in a later episode, but it really, really is interesting. I don't think it works for every possible size in the percentage amounts that she specifies, but it will work for a great many people. And as you knit, you can figure out what works for you. These are the comments from last week's episode. I had told a little story about how I tend to drop things when I'm out on the deck, and inevitably they fall through the cracks. So I asked if any of you had similar stories or funny ways that you've lost your yarn or your needles, and I got several really good comments. From Pandemic Knitter Beth, I got, "Grandchild, how exciting. I'm still waiting for my kids to get to that point. The oldest is 30, so time is ticking. My oldest is 31, so we're about at the same point of life. Your timing with asking about lost items is just right for me. We just had new floors installed and all the furniture was moved around. A week after that, a tape measure showed up on the floor next to my sofa. I've been missing that tape measure for months. It must have fallen between the cushions and just got jostled with all the moving. I'm so happy that it showed up again. The next day, a stitch marker showed up in the same spot. So funny." Eileen said, "There are currently several stitch markers and lip balms under my deck. Congratulations on the grandchild. I'm going to be a first-time grandma with a baby boy due May 4th. Well, ours are close together because mine is April 25th, so they could be born on the same day. I'm currently knitting a newborn kimono-style sweater that I'm going to give my son and his fiance for Christmas. So cute and so little." Hopefully they're not watching this, but I would guess they probably are not. Cool. If you guys have any ideas for really cute baby items, put that in the comments because, I'm looking for baby items. And honestly, I may look at them and adapt them and write my own pattern because that's just kind of the way I roll, but I love to see cute baby things. Wild Knit Diva said, "I have lost many DPNs while sitting on a friend's deck, but my most memorable loss was in the auditorium of our local community center. The auditorium seats about 400 people in 20 rows on the main floor. The floor is sloped from back to front, and I usually sit in the back. I was working on a hat on DPNs and one of the needles dropped. Thankfully it was wooden, so it didn't make too much noise. I left a message at the community center when I left in case the needle was found. So it was like in the middle of a performance. I got a call the following week that my needle was found on the floor in the front of the first row when they were cleaning. Since then, I only take projects using circulars." So I think that stuff happens to all of us. And sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. But And then sometimes you're lucky and it shows up again later. Thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate you being here and going with me on my journey with the baby surprise jacket. Leave me comments, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. I'd love to have you here as part of our community. Thanks.